Commence primary ignition.
I'm just not the hero type, clearly.
What a piece of junk.
Enterprise, this is the captain.
I got a bad feeling about this.
It's all part of the plan.
Engage.
Welcome back to Podcast 2 for 1. I'm your host, Donovan Thompson, with my co-host,
Daniel Wingfield.
and today is episode 110 of Podcast 2 for 1. Today we're talking Halo, the very first pilot episode. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, that notification bell. That way you're up to date on all future episodes of Podcast 2 for 1, as well as all the cool content we have at 2 for 1 Studios. YouTube.com/2 for 1 Studios, the best place to consume the content. 2 for 1 Collectors, 2 for 1 Backflash, and of course 2 for 1 Joe Live, where we bring you all the nerdy news Mondays at 9 a.m. Central. And of course, if you didn't know, and I bet you didn't, we are sponsored by Kapow Comics, located at 4047 East Hill Avenue in Sherwood, Arkansas. There they have comic books, collectibles, and of course, special guest appearances throughout the year. Woo!
Nailed it.
Thanks. I stuttered once, but I'm getting better and better. Okay, we're talking Halo today. I won't lie, I had it on the docket, Daniel. We're actually supposed to do a Truman Show this week, but it got pushed back, and we're doing that next week. And it worked out because Halo dropped yesterday, and it's like, hey, let's just do that. And I think I can speak for both of us and for everyone listening that you and I both are big Halo fans. They've been a big part of our lives, and for me particularly. I got in at Halo 3, Xbox 360 era, and then from then it's been my whole life. I still play Halo Infinite every week, actually, on multiplayer. And this TV show, this movie, or whatever it was supposed to be, has been in development hell for 10, 15 years or longer.
Yeah.
And it's been something that I've always wanted, because we're both film people, right? And so you want to see those kind of properties and make it to the big screen. And it's a property that is so rich for all these other mediums. Like, we know we've gotten tons of books, and we have had some TV-like things from them. And it's like, man, we just want to see it, the movie version. And finally they announced that they're doing a TV show on Paramount Plus. And of course, because they're in the streaming wars, right? And they need to have content. And what better content to have on your thing than Halo? That's a pretty good banger to have. Based on those first trailer reactions, I wasn't completely sold on it. But after this first episode, I got to say that I'm in. So real quick, give me your initial general thoughts on this first episode of Halo.
Sure. Yeah, so going into it, I also was not very intrigued by the trailers. To me, they felt pretty cheap. The action did not look great to me. And in a trailer, it's hard to get a tone or get an idea of the tone of the story, of the message. We knew they weren't following the game's story verbatim, and I think probably for a lot of us that gave us at least a moment of pause, because of, like you said, I grew up with Halo 1. I remember playing at a friend's house for the first time when I was probably way too young to play Halo, and then really joined the ranks of Halo 2. Oh, that's true. Yeah, you're right.
There's no too young.
It's right. Yeah, the brain development's a myth. You pop out of the womb and you're ready to go full steam. You could be a CEO day one if you need.
I was playing God of War when I was like 8. Is that too young to play God of War? Maybe it is. I don't know.
Maybe, I don't know.
Go on.
But yeah,
sorry.
So going into this, I had my expectations medium to low. I would say medium to low expectations, and I came out pleasantly surprised. For me, I think. There's still some action elements that I think show the budget, might you say, in certain areas. And I think not everything was perfect, but what it did really well to me was it gave us good characters that I already am liking for different reasons. And the main line of the story, or at least the threads that it's starting to kind of unravel with the story, to me are very intriguing and just very interesting kind of character-based drama. So I like I said, surprisingly, I think this show is better than I think, at least for me, I ever expected it could be. Like you said, being in development hell for so long, and two, just trying to take one of the most beloved game franchises onto the screen, and we've seen over time after time how typically that just utterly fails when we try to bring big franchises to the big or the small screen. And right now, I would say based on episode 1, now of course it could just nosedive from here on and just be horrible. But based on episode 1, I think this to me feels like one of the better adaptations that I've seen of a video game to a screen.
Yeah. Okay. So we know that's 9 episodes this first season, and season 2 has already been ordered. Of course it has, right? And I've seen generally positive things about this first 2 episodes. I think they played 2 episodes at South by Southwest a couple weeks ago.
I've seen like 7s, I think.
Yeah, 7s, 8s, maybe.
7s,
yeah,
7, 8s. Good to pretty good kind of range.
Yeah. And it's this show has been in development. Like they started shooting, I think, in 2019, and it shut down because of COVID, and they had to shoot the remaining 4 episodes in 2021. So wow. Everything's been affected drastically because of COVID, right? And it's interesting because we could have got this, 2 years ago. And I'll say this, going into it, I already made concessions in my head, like, okay, just based on the trailer alone, like, it didn't look very cinematic to me. It looked like a TV show in a lot of ways. And I say that
reminded me of Star Trek a little bit, like the action in Star Trek, like old Star Trek, like classic Trek, where it's almost theater-like in some of the ways that they're moving.
I could see that, yeah. And I think a big thing, and this is more of a personal preference, and there's a lot of people out there that argue that it looks very cinematic, it looks very high budget. I think it's lens choices, I think it's blocking, I think it's all these things that, like Breaking Bad to me, it doesn't, it feels very cinematic, right? Even, it feels like artistic cinematic, not even blockbuster cinematic. It feels like it's artistic. Yes. But you look at a show like, I don't know, The Crown or Stranger Things even, or something like that, where it looks like it could just be a still from a movie. Like there's a difference to it. And a part of it is even our, which we don't really talk about on the channel ever, is our, what our name comes from, right? And it's this idea of specific aspect ratios and things that forces you to put things, frame them differently. And I think this show would have went up about 5 extra points if it had a widescreen aspect ratio and they had treated it more as like a movie versus a TV show. It would have had more gravitas towards it. So that going into there, I'm like, man, okay, I'm not going to get the movie version. Like, I want the 2.5 hour adaptation of the first game. Like, I want that. That's a perfect story to tell in 2 hours for a movie. It's a fantastic story. It's digestible. You get a lot of world, and it's a pretty simplistic and very engaging and interesting story. They could easily fit in 2 hours because the first Halo game is not super dense in terms of story. It's really not.
If you take all the endless hallways out, it's like half the length anyway.
Exactly, we did this recently together. Yeah.
Yeah, you take the library and the game's 2 hours long. It's amazing. It's an 8-hour level. No one knows that. It's a little known fact that level is actually 8 hours.
Exactly, and you always know that going into this kind of stuff, they're going to make changes, and because they're adapting to a different medium. But that being said, this is one of those ones that I really think there still is a perfect or pretty damn good 2-hour movie version of the first game out there. I know there is, and I know that we could do it very well. I know we could. So going into this, my expectations were kind of low. And I think that watching the opening 20 minutes, I wasn't sold on these new characters, but the Spartans come in, it is cool. I do like seeing it. There is some, we'll get into it, but some weird CGI stuff and some like weird decisions they kind of make with movement and that kind of stuff. But it was overall, it's like, okay, I can get behind watching live action Spartans fight. Spartans are cool looking. It's the Master Chief. He looks pretty fucking cool. I can get behind that. And it wasn't until the second half of the episode kicked in. I remember I laid down on the couch. After that first 20 minutes, I laid down. And then the second half kicked in. And I sat back up. I was like, oh, okay. Now I'm more interested now. Like, this is interesting. And where we left off, the last 20 minutes, I was like, okay, this is different enough. And they're doing things that I didn't think I wanted in Halo that I'm like, okay, this now deserves a seat at the table, at least in conversation. which is what we're doing. So I'm interested.
100%.
I'm interested. So Daniel, tell me what's some of the things that you really liked about this episode, and then we'll bounce back and forth. But what's something that jumped out to you, like, man, this is awesome?
I'll kind of, slightly coming on the other side of what you said about the first 20 minutes. I actually really liked that they took that long to bring in the Sprite. Like, to me, like, I was afraid, like, going into this, you think, okay, well, they're going to try to pull out every stop in the first 10 minutes to hook everyone. So the first shot will be Master Chief. It'll be all these, like, video gamey things to, like, just be like, Master Chief video games. But I really like that they started with characters we've never seen before. I don't know if that planet has been, maybe it's been mentioned in the books or maybe mentioned in the games. I'm not familiar with it. Madrigal, I think.
The name sounds familiar to me, but I don't remember it.
Right. And man, honestly, was very surprised by the brutality of when the elites showed up. And like,
I was too.
The first people that die are kids in very gory kind of, like, the one kid that's running and he gets shot and half his leg gets blown off and he like spins onto the ground and then he just gets blown up by another bullet into nothing. I was like, holy fuck, man. Like,
yeah, I was very surprised.
Really quickly. And I liked that. Like, I was like, okay, like they've got balls here. They're not trying to make this a PG Halo, right? They're not trying to like make this family friendly. They're telling a badass space opera drama action thing. Which
also, real quick, that makes sense because in the game, of course, you get shot and you see your dead body. It's just a dead body. We never had like any type of dismemberment, like physics, right? But it makes sense that if you're getting shot with these plasma bullets, you're going to explode. You know,
it's going to be gorier than just like a bullet. You know what I mean? It's going to be like melting your face off type shit, which happens later.
Yep.
And I really enjoyed Kwan Ha and her dad. We got them for like, again, 20 minutes, but I believed their relationship and I thought it was really, really provocative. And then like when they put all the children in that room and then she escapes and then the brutes, like, they slaughter all the kids in there. Like, and I was just like,
everyone.
I thought they were going to, like, typically you see that because like she's about to leave and that one little kid's like, are we going to die? And she's like, no, you won't die or something like that. And they all fucking die. And I was just like, again, like, you're subverting my expectations in a good way when you're willing to like introduce the elites like this or the Covenant like this.
Yeah.
And when the Spartans came in, I thought that was really cool. I agree with you. I think there's some wonkiness to some of the action when they're moving around. It feels a little Power Ranger-y and not the best way at times.
Well, they have honestly, really long torsos, and like their hip joints and their torsos have this weird, like, that has to be a mix of CGI or something. I don't know.
To me, it almost looked like it needed more CGI. Like, it was all practical. Like, it was actually all there. Because like to me, when I'm watching this, my first thought was, well, I know that like part of this is like those suits are like, especially Master Chief's, looks almost like completely accurate, like 100% accurate to them.
Pretty close, yeah.
I'm sure that maybe there's little variations, but it's pretty damn close. I was almost like, well, I kind of wish they'd kind of slimmed them down a little bit, maybe gone more for like an Iron Man look and done like a full CGI suit, like not have them. Maybe some shots you have them in practical suits, but I think just in general the action would have benefited there. And honestly, that was probably a budget constraint decision.
Well, there's a trick there. Well, it shouldn't have been. This is Halo, but there's a trick. There's a trick there.
Yeah, but like, I don't know how big of a budget. It feels like this, like we said, it was in development hell. This show feels like kind of barely got greenlit and barely got out the door. And whoever did was like, I'll give you something, but like.
But I don't think it's because
this had a giant budget.
Well, I think it does have a big budget for what it is. I mean, I don't think that. I mean, it has Steven Spielberg as executive producer. He's been attached to this thing forever, and yeah, forever. He's been attached to this thing. Like, even was a feature film a long time ago. But I think
per episode, effectively.
That's expensive. That's very expensive.
Yeah, no,
that's Game of Thrones expensive. And the thing is, like, that to touch on the special effects or visual effects real quick, is that a thing that Iron Man does in his armor, and even like Thanos' armor and all these others in the later movies, is that there's a thing where like the armor actually clips in on itself, right? It doesn't make actually any real sense, but it gives them the ability to move around freely and to have more fluid, like human-like motion.
More natural, yes.
Yeah, even if it's breaking like the laws of how armor works, but it's like they're doing a good job covering it up, right? Some of those things that you see in breakdowns, but in motion, you're watching it, you don't care. That they should have went with that approach with this. They, like whenever they're doing like holding the gun up, like in their like walking down hallways, it looks like so clunky because they're so big and the gun is so big. Like there's no way that I believe that guy can snap his arm successfully to shoot a bullet and like to lock into place. Like it looks like cosplay almost, and like not
like when they're
not
running,
functional.
It's like they look slow even when they're running, supposedly fast, because it's so clunky. I think so. Yeah, so that totally is something that I noticed. But talking about more things that I really liked, I really liked Dr. Halsey. Speaking of Truman Show,
too.
we just saw her. If you just watched,
Oh shit!
Yeah.
I watched the Truman Show like hours before I watched this. I didn't even put that.
Yeah.
I was like, man, she looks familiar. I can't think of what she's been in. And I watched Truman Show like 2 hours beforehand. Oh my god. Okay.
Yeah, she's his mystery girl that he's trying to.
Wow.
Find or whatever.
Sylvia. Sylvia's her name.
Mm-hmm. So
Okay.
I thought she was great. I thought Captain Keyes, I liked him, then the actor there. It was interesting that they did this kind of love triangle between Dr. Halsey and Captain Keyes, and they had a daughter together, kind of thing.
What?
I did read that right? Like the Captain Keyes' daughter, when he's talking to her, and he's like talking about how the daughter's like, she cuts me off she's putting all these roadblocks in my way, whatever. And he's
You're
like,
not talking
it's nothing personal.
Not
And she
Halsey.
says, is it?
I think it's
Who was her mom?
it's his mom. Her mom is Amanda Keyes. It's like the general lady who's a bitch.
Admiral.
She's like the bitch lady that sends them to kill
The Admiral?
the UNSC to kill Chief at the end.
Oh, okay.
I'm pretty
But her
sure
name's
that's.
her name's not Keyes though. Her name's Admiral Margaret Perengoski.
I could have swore that was Amanda Keyes. Maybe I'm wrong. I guess I'm wrong.
Well, because she says he says don't take it personal, and she's like, it's hard not to when she's my mom. And so I was like, oh, and she kind of looks like she looks like she could be biracial.
Really?
The girl. Which she's Dr. Miranda Keyes. Yeah.
What's Halsey?
Yeah.
I don't even see Halsey here in the main cast. Where are you?
Yeah, she's
Halsey?
her name's Cortana Dr. Catherine Elizabeth Halsey. Natasha McAlone is in the cast. I'm looking at. Anyway, so we can get back to that. But I really liked the relationship between her and her dad. I really liked, surprisingly, I really thought it worked when Chief took his helmet off. And I thought Pablo Schreiber impressed me. I liked him as Chief. Even, and this is slightly an aside, but I've seen some rumors about him potentially being cast as the next Wolverine. And after seeing him, I'm like, yeah, okay, I can see him in that role. I think it's a little bit funny that didn't his brother play the Wolverine's like main antagonist guy in the Wolverine Origins movie?
His brother is. Oh shit! Is that him? It's
Lev Schreiber.
Oh, it's his brother. Holy shit! Did not know that. Yeah, he plays Sabretooth in X-Men Origins Wolverine. He's also Ray Donovan.
Liev Schreiber. Yeah, that's his brother. So it'd be hilarious if the actor that played Sabretooth eventually his brother played Wolverine. That would be kind of funny.
You will hear more about this on 2-for-1 Joe that's coming Monday, but I think that was the thing. They said that he had talked to Marvel in the past about playing Wolverine. So he actually talked about it. So if he talked about it, it's definitely not happening anytime soon.
Very true.
There's no way he would spill those beans if he was in any talks or anything of actually being Wolverine.
Unless he's trying to drum up fan
I think that may have been maybe an angle, but you're right. I think the thing that actually impressed me the most, and I had heard or saw something online beforehand that he was going to take his helmet off, and we always kind of wondered, are they going to do it because they don't do it in the games X, Y, and Z, and they do it, and I was like, oh, this is the thing I didn't know I wanted from Halo, is to see the person behind the mask. Like, because it makes it different enough already where you're like, oh, like, that's Master Chief, and it's a guy. And I immediately connected to him, like, 10 times more than I already have. Like, not more than the game, but the game is just different, right? You are Master Chief. It's different. But I connected him more than I ever did in the trailers or anything like that, because I'm like, oh, there's a guy there now. And I thought he did good.
It was the right decision. It was the right decision.
It was too.
Literally, we were talking about Mandalorian in the past about them. He takes his helmet off once at the end of season 1, and it's this big moment. But that, like, I think I've talked about, like, the reason I think that Baby Yoda works so well with Mandalorian is because they kind of have this Baby Yoda face to connect to alongside this just helmet. It's just a helmet. They needed, I think, to do this, to make this show, to make me connect to his character, because I think you're right. Like, when we're playing those games, we're Master Chief. Like, I'm Master Chief, right? And so if you just never showed me his face, there would just be this weird disconnect of, like, well, that's not how I would do it, kind of thing. Or
right.
Like, that doesn't feel like my Chief. But when you put a face on him, it's kind of like, to me, it almost feels like alternate universe kind of
it
thing,
is,
right?
100%.
Well, this is like an alternate universe to the Halo games where Chief takes his helmet off and this guy is Chief, this man. And, bouncing off that too, I really was it took me by surprise, but this whole plot line of him being touched by this Covenant artifact, and I guess, like, Spartans are kind of just killing machines that don't think up to this point in this show, or like they have no free will, it might even seem. Or at least they never exercise it.
It almost implies he could be a clone, or he was told he was a clone, or he was told he was born for this.
Lab grown, yes, exactly.
And he wasn't. Yeah, and he wasn't.
Right. And so using this kind of Covenant element to wake him up out of that, to basically give him free will, I think, or give him, like, kind of consciousness and the ability to choose what he wants to do. And that being like an immediate clash with the UNSC, which we're used to being like, and that's another thing this whole show does, is like it puts this great tension between us and the UNSC. Like, they're not just the good guys.
Bad.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
there's these political elements going on where you've got these, like, what seems like separatists or people that want independence and freedom, trying to break away. They're kind of having these, like, precursor to a civil war type skirmishes and stuff. And now you've got the Covenant coming in, which is like this whole third party force that really doesn't give a shit about all that. And so that's great. I love that. I think that's so much more interesting way to play with these factions and these things we've seen in the games, but make it more of this kind of web of complexity. And, like, again, there's a lot of political elements to the show already, and you really don't get that in the games at all. It's a military game, right? It's just like, these are bad guys, go kill them, and we're the good guys, they're the bad guys. That's kind of just the whole kind of thing about the games. And so really impressed with Pablo Schreiber, really impressed with the direction they're taking this character and kind of making him this rogue agent of Spartan that I'm assuming will go. And I'm guessing a Halo gets introduced at some point, though, to be honest, I wouldn't be incredibly angry if that's like last episode. And that really sets up, like, season 2. Like, take your time, because that is what I felt like this episode did. I think it took its time to do all this stuff. Like, like, if you think about what plot happened, the colony gets attacked, Master Chief shows up, there's a bunch of talking as they're traveling back, and there's a lot of talking with just different characters, like, that are at the base, I guess, or on Reach, or on their way to Reach, or whatever it is. And then they escape, like, but they took their time in each one of those moments to connect us to characters, to have meaningful conversation, meaningful dialogue. You know what I mean? And I thought, I think that's what surprises me so much. The thing that's most hooked me here is the story. And that, for me, is you're always going to win me over with the story more than you are. Like, I can get past the clunky Spartan suits and the Power Rangers action a little bit if the story's good. And, like, that to me is the best part of the show so far, and that is why I'm all the way in at this point.
Yeah, no, I think I couldn't say it any better. I mean, that's the big thing for me. Again, I was laying down on the couch, and then the midpoint when the story kind of started, I was like, oh, what's going on here? And I'm typically almost not the reverse. I think story trumps king. Story is always king, But I'm also very much more forgiving when there's really good action involved, and the action was good. Like there's cool stuff in it, but again, it was the story that made it all click together, right? And you mentioned Reach, and I think I'll talk a little bit about the things. I agree with everything you said. I don't have any complaints. I mean, I do wonder now if Kanha, is that her name? I wonder if she's going to be like the Baby Yoda companion now that's going to be throughout the series with Master Chief, which I kind of am a little wary of because I understand you have like a human character to relate to and to kind of see through their eyes, but also, I don't know, to me, it's Master Chief's story, so don't be afraid to like kill her off or have someone else in season 2 or to build up other people or something, but we'll get there. What's interesting to me is yes, we're not seeing the Halo this episode or this season. I don't know if we'll see the Halo at all this season. We might see the Prophets talking about on a hologram, much like the Death Star, something like that. Like we're going to this. I suspect we might get to the fall of Reach this end of this season. Yeah. That might be the big thing. Like where basically Chief, it already seemed. What's interesting is when you start first Halo game, you're Master Chief. Everyone's already heard of you, and you're going to stop the Covenant, and you find the Halo ring, right? And it's like a mystery. What is the Halo ring? We and the humans have been fighting the Covenant for a while. This universe, which this has been talked about in the extended canon of Halo, but I think it's much more it's a little different to me. It's like there's this separatist group on Madrigal. Yep. They've never even heard of the Covenant. They're that far removed from
they're bigger than that, right? Like it's like I assume it's like a bigger association of people that are I
assume so. I assume so, but I get the impression they're not as well connected as like the UNSC is. Like we're separatists, you're separatists, X, Y, and Z.
I don't know how united they are. I agree.
Because she mentions even like I want to get off this rock, implying that this has been her life, her whole life, right? Yeah. Very much like a Luke Skywalker kind of thing.
It is. I guess the part that's making me think that is the part where she's talking about how the first time she met Chief,
right,
was when he came in and killed a bunch of people. That it was a, I guess, insurrectionist meeting kind of thing. And for one, great moment and great dialogue around that whole thing. I love that. I love that whole. I've actually seen you before, and it kind of gives this hint of like the UNSC is a bit more corrupt in this universe.
It seems very
yeah, like honestly, much closer to like real life, like military, giant military kind of governments. But yeah, no, I agree. I think Kwan Ha is great, and I think I would assume that she might. My kind of hope is that she ends up playing a major role in kind of the political side of things. That maybe she's the one that eventually is the representative of the separatist or whatever that is. But I agree with you. I think Reach seems like the fall of Reach seems like the perfect kind of
finale
moment to build this season around. And maybe it's even, I could see this thing where obviously Chief and Kwan Ha are off going somewhere, who knows. I could see this version of events where they go off on their own adventure and they end up stumbling upon a Halo. Maybe they don't try to blow it up yet. It's more of like they discover it and then they're going back to tell them, and then that's when Reach starts falling, and then they show up to the final battle.
Totally likely.
And then like the final scene is like they're like, well, I guess what's next? And he's like, we've got bigger issues or something, like some kind of line about, and then he like puts the hologram down and the Halo pops up, and then it's like
100%.
That's our last shot. That's what I want. I want that kind of slow, methodical. Let's set things up, well, and not feel like we have to rush it to the big, kind of hype moments, I guess.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was saying, is that what's different about this too is that, it feels like they're disconnected enough, Madrigal, that they don't know the Covenant exists. But the UNSC has been fighting the Covenant at least for some period of time, right? They've shifted fighting separatists to the Covenant. Yeah.
It seems like dating, like, because that one, is it Scottish or Irish guy? I'm gonna get anyone that's actually Scottish or Irish will get mad at me. The guy with the long hair, he's playing cards. He says, like, when they show up, he's like, I thought it was propaganda, like the rumors were propaganda.
Right.
So it sounds like I would assume like the Covenant, they maybe encountered them like on the borders of the territory like a couple times, but not anything full scale. It doesn't seem like.
They seem very unprepared, and B, they had no idea what they were fighting against, and the Covenant just mow through them like nothing, like it's like they're paper, right? Absolutely nothing. But no, I mean that's what's interesting about this is that they're already putting Master Chief into this, like they're isolating him enough, where he's a rogue agent now. And that's totally different. I mean, other than Master Chief does his own thing in the games, like to kind of get the job done, but he's never like disobeyed orders for self-interest, and you know what I'm saying, like without like good reason.
Well, isn't that kind of Halo 5 a plot a little bit?
Yeah, but it's different because at that point, I'm talking about. You're right, but it's different in the fact that what he's doing is still saving people. He's not saving anyone other than this one person. He was like saving the galaxy because he believed they need Cortana, right? And this one, he's saving a person because he's all of a sudden having memories, and not because of if I don't save this person, the galaxy's going to destroy. They don't know it yet, kind of thing. And
totally right. And I will say too, I think it's interesting that the Spartans still kind of seem like they're like Dr. Halsey and the Spartans. I think are still on his team, but they're.
I loved it. Whenever she was like, "Hey, if you want, like, whenever do you want this, like, you protect the chief," and they were like, "Of course we're going to protect the chief." Like, I loved that. It was so cool.
She said, "Why would?" Yeah, like something like, "If they're against the chief, they're enemies," or something like that, or something.
Like, of course,
like,
he's the man.
And honestly, that was like maybe the one thing I kind of wanted this moment where they like walked up to the door and then opened it. And then instead of going inside, just like did a 180 turn and like raised their guns like on everyone. Like
that's what I was expecting.
And I think we will probably eventually get a moment like that. And I don't think it's the worst thing to set that up and then pay that off later. But man, I agree. Like when they were walking up and like just kind of that like, these guys around them don't even know.
They don't know at all.
They don't even know. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Like they were going to get their ass handed to them if they tried to do anything bad. And yeah, I agree. I mean, but one thing that does, it kind of keeps their anonymity like disclosed because they didn't do anything. So and Chief got away without their help. So it's like they're basically like a sleeper cell now within the UNSC. But there's obviously going to be some type of conflict there with like orders versus protecting the chief and how they feel about that and kind of freeing their own minds, I guess. But let's talk about some other things real quick. So we know that if we assume they're following the games enough to at least put on the prophets, I think the prophets are looking for the Halo to fire it to as you know, our viewers, if you don't know, the Halo basically in their mind is like a religious pathway to heaven. If they fire it, then they're going to go to heaven and X, Y, and Z.
Right.
It's not that, spoilers. I assume that's what the prophets they're going for. But what's interesting also is that there's a human character, almost like they're taking orders from, or like there's at least some mutual respect for. And I was kind of like, oh, this is interesting. That was not sure I liked it, but also I didn't hate it.
Yeah, no, that was very interesting, and I'm interested to see where they go with that. Obviously, it definitely seemed like she was not maybe even from Earth, even though she's human.
Yeah,
potentially just kind of based on some of the dialogue. And I'll also say that the Prophet CGI was maybe the best in the episode.
When he's talking, really his facial expressions, I was like, oh, I can see him emoting pretty well. Like he emoted really well.
And he looked like the games, and it also looked good enough for like a show kind of thing.
I just thought, what if now? I mean, we totally have the ability, and they kind of have to. We might get the Arbiter. Like we might get to see the Shangaheli, is that what they are, the elites. We might get to see them in like another facet of the story throughout a season, maybe next year, of like him in the culture of the elites and him being banished, and that will be awesome. Right, the Halo 2.
They're going to need to up their CGI budget a little bit for season 2, I think, if they do that. Because if they're going to have like a full Thanos, basically full CGI character, I want it to look good. But I think that's possible, especially if this first season's a hit. I think they'll probably go up in budget for the next episode.
Yeah, I mean, some of those Halo 2, even Halo 5 and cinematics, that 343 redone, those elites look almost better than the ones we got in this live action movie. And they emote, like they talk very well. I mean, I know it's a little different. It's not super one-to-one like live action, but still they look really good. And there's room for improvement on the elites. It still looks good. It's just not, I don't know if they can carry a lot of conversation yet. You know,
for action scenes, they're good enough because they're in motion and you're not getting a close look. But
they are clunky though. They're like big. They're not lanky looking, right? They kind of look more like brutes and elites combined almost.
They're bulkier. No, they definitely been hitting the gym since the games.
Definitely. Yeah.
And I think, you know, to me, the ultimate, maybe this is like season 3, but like whenever the flood comes in, that's going to be like,
Jesus Christ.
I
keep forgetting this is Halo. Like I keep forgetting all the cool things about Halo. Because it feels so different already.
It does. And at first I was like, will the flood be there? I'm like, well, yeah, if there's a Halo, they have to be there. Like that's the point of the Halos, unless they really deviate from the script. But to me, that would seem like just a useless deviation. I mean,
I agree.
It's basically Halo's zombies. You know what I mean? And like, it's not hard to do zombies well enough, I think, in this show. And I think, you know, I can't wait till we get there. But again, that's kind of the thing of like, I hope we're not getting that this season. I hope we're getting that maybe end of next season or season 3 even would be fine with me. I just think, you know, I love the slow pace that they've started with.
Yeah. It
makes me feel like they're not in a rush to get to like, again, these kind of like gamery hype moments. Oh, we gotta see the Halo in the first episode. We got, you know, like these kind of what I see as like executive, like studio level decisions that are just making them based on like market data of like, oh, well, everyone likes this thing, so this thing better be in the first episode or the first season or whatever.
Right.
It seems like they've got a bit more of a level head on their shoulders with that kind of thing. This is all based on episode 1, so I mean, this could all be false after episode 2.
It's true.
But yeah, I think to me it just feels like they're slowly building this universe, and they're taking it in some interesting new directions, and like, I think that's the perfect thing to do with the IP. I hear you. I think, you know, I do think that there's a perfect 2-hour movie of Halo 1 out there. But for a TV show and kind of, you know, to finally get Halo's feet into the water of screens of you know, watching, not playing, I think this is a fantastic first start or first step.
I think you're right. I think, and the more we're talking about it, the more I'm going to go watch it again. Actually, the more we're talking about it, and I'm in. I mean, I was already in anyway because of what it was, but after watching it, and someone who like, obviously, video game adaptations is kind of like always a really tricky thing for people like us, and we're like we're very critical. I'm in because it's different enough, and also there's things that I look forward to that I know we could potentially get because of the games, but also the big thing here that I think, and we've gotten this in the games and pieces here and there, but the big thing I'm really excited about, at least for this universe, and it looks like this first episode is showing us what this is, and also it's what the season's about, is who is Master Chief and why does he do what he does. Yes. And I think that, and like, I think it's a smart thing is this year, don't focus on the big Halo things, focus on your character first, and then challenge them with things, right? And that's what they're doing. They're like, hey, here's this character, and we're going to challenge him with, like, what does it mean to be a soldier, and who am I, and do I have to be this, you know, robot? And I mean, he has even good humor. She says, do you eat anything? And he was like, yeah, nuts, bolts, and microchips. And I thought that was hilarious. I thought that was like, this is funny. That's a funny thing to say, you know, because he's very dry.
Very self-aware. Yeah, that's very nice. No, I completely agree. I mean, they're focusing on the characters and good storytelling. And I feel like that's often what so many video game adaptations just miss. It's like they're all going for like those like one-to-one like costume design or we're going to have this moment that is in this cutscene of you know, this Assassin's Creed game or whatever it is, and like we're going to build all the hype around these gamey moments that we're just putting on a screen. and that can't carry a good show or a good movie. It just can't. I mean, like, it can carry a good fan film on YouTube. That's what those fan films are. They're just recreations of like stunts and shots and moments from games, right? That's all they're doing. You need substance, you need characters, you need good story. And so far, Halo is showing me that they've got that figured out more than really any other adaptation that I can think of at the moment. Has
maybe, yeah. I will say last thing.
This is, basing it on episode 1, so I there is a chance that my foot will go all the way in my mouth by the end of this.
It's very possible. The last thing I'll say is just a few little tweaks I would prefer. Again, I really think that they should have stuck to more of a wider aspect ratio. I think that they should have had. I'm not a fan of these like GoPro, drone shots, and like also the idea of like shooting on shooting people with close-ups on a wide lens. Like, I'm not a fan of that at all. Like, stick to like a 35 or something. Like, and this is filmmaking stuff, but to me those things like really changed the show. I wish that they'd kind of nail some of the CGI a little bit better, and some of the movement. It kind of sometimes it feels really good, it looks really good, and sometimes it feels kind of weird and CGI or too clunky. And then the other thing I wish, I didn't have a problem with this, but you do hear some of the Halo music in there. I wish they might have used a little bit more of it, because it's so iconic, and like those drums and you could use it and it automatically makes everything you do better. And if you have, I know like they're trying to be probably a little different and not rely on that kind of stuff, but also if you got it and you can use it and it's that good, it's okay to use it in this situation. Like, you're going to tap into something there,
You're right. I have hope that we might see it show up like at the the climax episode. Yeah, I think there's a good chance that like whenever Master Chief is having basically his Thor arrives in Wakanda moment from Infinity War, I could see it showing up there for like the first time, and it just being in like full force. Dun, 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 dun,
I hope so.
You know what I mean? Like,
another thing too is
adrenaline will pulse through my veins.
I hope so. Another last thing, literally last thing, is that I'm not a huge fan of these POV shots that are trying to mimic the game. I'm like, that feels a little. I kind of get it because they're like Spartans and you're like almost like an Iron Man. You're looking through their HUD, and I get that part of it, but it's almost like, well, since it's too close to home, where it feels too fan servicey and too cheesy.
Sure.
The only time it really works is when like he gets the orders to kill her, and it feels kind of very Terminator-y then. But other than that, it's kind of like we don't really like. You don't have to do that kind of fan service for us. I don't need when I'm watching Mortal Kombat for people to become immediately on a 2D plane and health bars to show up above them. I don't need that.
I agree. I think I agree with you. It didn't always come off great. I'm okay though with that kind of fan service that's just kind of these like sprinkles in between little moments. It's not the focus of the show. And I do understand that like at a level of, hey, we're trying to appeal to fans of the game and other people, you do want to put some things in there that are basically just for fans of the game. You know what I mean? Like, oh shit, like, whether it's I heard many times like the shield recharge sound, like when
100%.
He gets his shield, the sound when the elite went invisible with the invisibility was like exactly the same.
Yeah, all those were exactly. I mean, I thought that was a little cheesy. Him running out, and then all of a sudden
it gets a little cheesy. It does get a little cheesy, and I think but I guess I'm okay with that level of cheese because it's not the point, because we're not focusing on it, because it's just these little moments in between what's really going on. Okay, I get it. We need a little fan service in a Halo game. We need some specific references to what we grew up doing, which is this first person point of view and all this kind of stuff. But I agree with you. It was most of the time just a little too on the nose. And I think even if they had all those sounds in there, but they were like half the sound, like half the volume level, just more subtle, I think that might have worked a lot better.
Yeah, and I also, it would have helped them. I know why they did it, but the show looks the best when it's in a colder, dark environment, obviously for CGI reasons. And like Chief, like in that opening title sequence, the Chief looks the best when he's standing there in the title sequence and it's like blue light and it's dim.
Sure.
That
Yeah.
I think they would have been called out for it if they had done it, but I think it may have served them a little better to not have the elites in such bright areas. At least this first season, they could have been smarter about it and had like snow and rain and things like that to kind of cover up some of this stuff. Like very much like the Mandalorian does. That's what they should have done this first season at least, and made the elites. They feel fucking ferocious. Like they feel like fuck, these guys are bad. But it would have been almost even better if they were maybe a little slimmer and like in the dark more. Like they were like monsters, like true monsters.
I will say that I do this was a thought I had watching it. I really enjoyed the first 20 minutes. I almost wish it was more of a horror sequence than an action sequence.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that might have benefited, and just to make them more like mysterious, more like like honestly pulling more from like Alien. You know what I mean? Where it's like,
well, it's very Predator in the beginning. It's like Predator. They're invisible. That's it. It's like Predator. It's Predator.
So many ways. Yeah. And so
even the mandibles.
I do agree.
Predator. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, to be fair, whenever the flood come, I expect that to be full on horror. So maybe they're like, well, we want to save our horror sequences for other things. That I could understand. But yeah, I agree with you.
Well, I think everyone probably gets the impression that we're both in. I would like to, if our schedule allows it, to kind of touch base every now and then and talk about every couple episodes that drop. We have 8 more weeks of Halo, so we'll be talking about it as the channel goes on, and we have gaps in our movie releases and times with Bruce. So, Daniel, how can our listeners write into us?
Listeners, you can write into bit.ly/241mail and let us know what you thought about Halo, what you thought about Pablo Schreiber's Master Chief, what you thought about the story, the action. Let us know. I'm sure there's some differing opinions out there. bit.ly/241mail, and if you write in, we'll read it on the show.
There you go. And of course, again, we can't stress this enough. If you please can subscribe to our channel, youtube.com/241studios. And of course, if you're on podcast servers, you can always leave us a review. It helps people find the podcast, it helps people find the YouTube channel. We get more subscribers, we get to make more content and do more things like this. And who knows, maybe one day you could be on the show just like our good friend Joel Williams. He was the guy who wrote in, and then now he's one of the hosts on 241 Joe live every Monday.
Right.
So that's moving up. One day he'll be sitting in my seat at podcast 241.
That was a life-changing career move for him.
It was.
I think I heard him say that verbatim.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Daniel, it's always a pleasure. We'll talk next week, The Truman Show, and then I believe after that we might have Morbius. Don't quote me. No, we have Moon Knight. Fuck yeah, Moon Knight's coming out
so
pretty
much
soon.
better. Oh my god.
5 days away from Moon Knight, baby.
My mood went from to holy fuck, yes. So
yeah, dude, Moon Knight is incredible. Alrighty, my name is Donovan Thompson.
I'm Daniel Wingfield.
And we have spoken.